It was the 4th of July weekend, and my parents were out of town. They were going to be gone for a few days, so I thought it was the perfect chance to throw a small party in our backyard. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing much usually happens, and I figured inviting some friends over wouldn't cause any trouble. I told a group of about 20 people to come by. We had a pool, so I asked everyone to bring their swimsuits. I also had a small stash of fireworks left over from last year. I said we could light them later in the night. I tried to keep everything outdoors. I didn't want anyone inside making a mess or breaking things. The party went really well. More people showed up than I expected. It was probably closer to 30 in total. Some people swam, others drank and played games in the grass, and a few just hung out by the chairs near the pool. At some point, someone suggested we light off the fireworks, so we brought them to the street and put on a small show. Nothing crazy, just enough to entertain everyone. By around 1:30 in the morning, the party had died down. Everyone had left. All that was left behind was a yard covered in red plastic cups and empty cans. I was tired and a little drunk. I figured I'd clean everything up the next day. I locked up the back door, changed clothes, brushed my teeth, and collapsed in bed. Not long after I lay down, I started to hear what sounded like firecrackers outside. It was close. It sounded like it was coming from the backyard. At first I thought maybe someone was still there trying to mess with me. I got up and looked out my bedroom window, and there it was, a string of firecrackers going off right next to the pool. It startled me. I pulled up the window and yelled out asking who was still out there. No one answered. I ran downstairs and opened the sliding glass door to the backyard, but I left the screen door closed. I stood there for a second and said again, "Who's out there?" But the yard was completely quiet. The fireworks had stopped. I texted a few people from the party, even dropped a message in the group chat asking if anyone was still around or had just left. A couple people responded, saying they were already home in bed. Most didn't answer. I waited a minute and then decided to walk out into the backyard. The grass was littered with cups and bottles, but no one was out there. I stayed there for maybe a minute, looking around. No voices, no movement. So I went back inside, locked up the door again, and returned to my room. I had just gotten back in bed when I heard something from the hallway. It came from the upstairs living room, not far from where I was. It sounded like something small falling to the floor. My heart started to race. It was late. I didn't think anyone had stayed behind. But what if someone passed out in one of the downstairs bedrooms or fell asleep on a couch? That felt like a stretch, but not impossible. Still, I didn't want to leave my room just yet. I quietly got out of bed and went to the door. I put my ear up to it and waited. At first, there was nothing. And then I heard footsteps, slow and heavy, walking down the hallway toward my room. Then the doorknob started to jiggle. The door was locked, thankfully. I stepped back, panicking, not sure what to do. Then there was a hard bang against the door, like someone hitting it with their fist. I yelled through the door, telling them to leave, that I had a weapon and wasn't afraid to use it. And then a man's voice, low and calm, said, "Jay, you in there?" Before I could react, I heard a voice right behind me inside the room say, "Yeah." I turned. There was a man standing near my dresser. He wore a mask and he had what looked like a gun in his hand. I let out a scream, but he was on me fast. He grabbed my mouth with his hand and whispered for me to shut up or he would shoot me. I froze.
Then he unlocked the door and opened it. Another masked man stood outside. They spoke to each other in low voices I couldn't make out, and then pushed me back onto the bed. I sat there, trying to do everything I can not to pass out or panic. The one who was guarding me kept the gun pointed at me while the other one walked toward my parents' bedroom. He came back asking me for the code to my parents' safe. I told him I didn't know it. That was the truth. Then a third person came into view. 3 of them. 3 masked strangers inside my house. I sat there, doing everything I could not to pass out or panic. They went through the drawers, my mom's jewelry box, and the closet. I could hear them taking things, stuffing them into backpacks. I didn't move. I didn't speak. The man with the gun stood just a few feet away the whole time. After what felt like forever, but was probably 10 minutes, one of the men shouted that it was time to go. The guy with the gun left the room last. They ran downstairs, out the back door, and vanished into the dark. I ran to the window trying to see what kind of car they'd got into, but there was nothing. They must have parked down the block. I grabbed my phone and called the police. When the officers arrived, they asked if we had any security cameras. We didn't. They asked if I got a good look in any of them. I hadn't. All I could tell them was that one of them had called the other Jay. They asked if I knew where they went or what kind of car they drove. Again, I had nothing. They spoke to a few of our neighbors, asking if their doorbell cameras picked anything up, but no one had any footage. It was like they had planned everything perfectly. Set off fireworks to draw me outside, slipped into the house while I was distracted, and moved quickly to tick whenever they could. That's what I believe happened. They knew there was a party. They probably watched from a distance and waited until everyone left. Then they struck. My parents were furious when they got home. They blamed the party for what happened, and I understood why. But they were also just glad that I was okay. They said that the stuff they lost wasn't worth losing me over. After that night, we installed cameras around the whole property. Front door, backyard, even the side gates. I don't know who those men were, and I still think about the one who was in the room with me before I even realized it. How long had he been standing there? How did I not see him when I walked back in? Was he hiding in the closet behind the door? That part still keeps me up at night sometimes. The 4th of July is supposed to be about celebration, but now, every year when the fireworks start going off, I feel my stomach turn. I always double-check the locks. I always close the blinds. And I never, ever stay home alone.
Back in the summer of 2015, the 4th of July landed on the Saturday. The park near my house always had a big fireworks show that night. It was the kind of event that pulled in huge crowds. Families, couples, kids, everyone gathered in that same field year after year. It was always packed. Parking was impossible. People were shoulder to shoulder trying to get the best view. But a couple years earlier, one of my friends showed me this hidden spot nearby. It was a sump just outside the park boundary. The place was overgrown and fenced off, but it sat low enough that you could lie down in the grass and still see the whole fireworks show clearly, without being surrounded by 100 people. No one really went there. It became our secret spot. That year, I had been talking to a girl named Ashley. We had met in a class the previous semester and had been out on a few casual dates. When the 4th of July came around, I thought the sump would be the perfect place to take her. It was close to my house, private, and it felt like something special, not just sitting in a crowded field. I asked her if she wanted to watch the fireworks with me. She said yes right away. She showed up to my house a little before 8, and we walked over together. I had packed a blanket in my backpack along with a couple bottles of soda and a small bottle of tequila. We weren't planning to get drunk, just enough to relax and enjoy the night. The walk was quick. We passed by the front of the park, which was already overflowing with people and cars trying to find parking. I led Ashley down one of the quiet dead-end streets next to the park. At the very end of the street, hidden between two fences, was the gate to the sump. It was never locked. I pushed it open, made sure it didn't slam shut, and told her to watch her step as we carefully walked down the slope into the center of the area. The sump was a rectangular basin filled with trees and tall grass along the edges. At the bottom was a small clearing, just wide enough for us to lay out the blanket and enjoy the night. We turned on our phone flashlights to help see where we were walking. The sun had already dipped below the trees and it was getting darker by the minute. Once we settled in the clearing, I spread out the blanket and handed Ashley a drink. The two of us sat close together, talking and laughing in the dim light. Even though we were only a short walk from the park, it felt like we were miles away. The noise from the crowd was distant. We could hear an occasional honk of a car, maybe a shout here and there, but mostly it was quiet, peaceful. And then we both heard something behind us. It was faint, like a soft crunch in the brush. We turned and looked, but the trees swallowed everything in darkness. I pointed my flashlight in that direction, but it didn't help much. Back then, our phones didn't have very strong lights. Ashley asked me if anyone else knew about this place. I told her a couple of my friends had been here before, but none of them would come out here on a date night just to mess with me. I also said it could have been an animal, a raccoon or something. She didn't seem to worry, so we shrugged it off and went back to our drinks. Just as we took our second sips, the first firework exploded in the sky. The sudden burst of color on the light startled both of us. Ashley jumped a little and laughed. From our spot, we had a perfect view of the sky above the park. The fireworks lit up the sump too, if only for a few seconds each time. Every big burst painted the trees and grass in flickers of red, green, or blue, before everything faded back into darkness. We watched the show for a while. I was starting to forget about the noise we heard earlier. Then it happened again. Another sound behind us. This time it wasn't as soft. I don't think Ashley heard it clearly, but she saw me tense up and turn my head. She asked me what I was looking at. I didn't want to scare her, so I just said it was nothing. But in my head, I was starting to feel uneasy. After a moment, I turned all the way around and looked back toward the edge of the trees behind us. And that's when I saw it. During a burst of several fireworks that lit up the whole area, I saw a figure standing among the trees. It was a person, dressed in all black. I couldn't make out any features, but the way they were standing, half hidden behind the brush, told me they weren't there by accident. They were watching us. I leaned toward Ashley and whispered that someone was up there. She turned quickly, but by then the sky had gone dark again. The next firework took a few seconds to go off, and when it did, the figure was gone. Ashley was shaken. So was I. Neither of us could believe what had just happened. We talked about going to the police, but what would we say? We didn't have proof. We didn't even get a good look at their face. It was just some figure in the trees. Could have been a prank. Could have been someone living nearby trying to scare people off, but the way they ran at us, it didn't feel like a joke. It felt aggressive, dangerous. After that night, I never went back to that sump again. Ashley and I went on one more date, but we both kind of drifted after that. She said she kept having dreams about the figure of the trees. So did I. Sometimes on quiet nights, I still think about that person standing up there, watching, waiting. And I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't left when we did.
It happened one 4th of July night when a group of us were hanging out after lighting fireworks. We were just bored and looking for something to do, and that's when my friend Zach brought up the idea of checking out an unfinished house in a new development not too far from his place. At first, there were about 5 of us, but 2 people bailed before we even got inside. That left just 3, me, Zach, and our other friend Adam. The house was only half built. There were no finished walls, no doors, and no windows, just a skeleton made up of wooden beams and dusty floors. You could see straight through it from one end to the other. The basement was made of concrete, floor and walls. There were 2 more floors above it, and they had stairs already built, though a bit rough. The place wasn't exactly safe, but it felt solid enough to explore. Zach reminded us to keep our flashlights off as much as possible. Some of the surrounding homes were already finished and occupied, and he didn't want to draw attention. He was right. The last thing we needed was for someone to see our lights through the window frames and call the cops. So we agreed to stick to the shadows and move quietly. We stayed close together. There were a few strange sounds at first. Something falling over upstairs, then another sound below us. We thought maybe the wind had knocked something loose, or maybe a raccoon or some other animal was inside. But the sounds kept switching floors. We'd hear something upstairs, rush up, and then hear something downstairs and run back down. It was weird, like something was intentionally messing around with us. But again, we figured it was probably nothing. Maybe the wood was just shifting, or something was rolling around with the wind. After a while, we made our way to the basement. It was darker down there, colder too. We moved slow, trying not to trip over tools, broken boards, or scrap metal. Then I noticed something. Someone was walking up the stairs beside me. I could see the glow of a phone screen in their hand, lighting up just enough to make out their shape. At first, I thought it was Zach or Adam. I whispered, asking if it was one of them. Both of them responded immediately from right in front of me. That's when I realized we weren't alone. The person with the phone disappeared into the darkness before I could react. And right after that, a bunch of long metal pipes that had been leaning against the wall suddenly fell over, crashing down the basement stairs. It was too controlled to be random. Someone had pushed them. We froze. It was silent after that, completely still. No one spoke. And then we all moved at once. We ran up the stairs and out of the house. Once we were outside, we stopped on the road a good distance away and tried to catch our breath. We were all shaken, but Zach still thought it could have been one of the 2 people who left earlier. I told him that didn't make sense. One of them was a girl who didn't even want to walk through the grass earlier because she didn't want to get her shoes dirty. The other was her boyfriend who stuck to her side the entire night. Neither of them would have snuck back into a dark construction site just to mess with us. Zach didn't seem convinced. Then he realized his keys were missing. He said he must have dropped them somewhere inside the house. He had no choice but to go back and look. Adam and I stayed outside, standing on the quiet street watching the half-built house from a distance. We didn't speak much. The longer we stood there, the more I started to feel something was wrong. I thought I saw a figure moving on the right side of the house. Big, dark, slow. It was hard to tell without the flashlight, but it didn't look like a shadow. It looked like a person. I whispered to Adam, asking if he saw it too. He said no, but he was clearly tense. A few minutes later, Zach came back holding his keys. He looked pale. He said he saw someone inside again. He was still trying to say it could have been our other friends, but I didn't believe it. Then Zach decided to walk around the outside of the house to see if he could spot anything. Adam and I followed him. We stuck to the left side first, stepping carefully around pieces of wood and scattered trash. The back of the house was open-ended, no fence, no gate. Zach moved toward one of the back corners and then suddenly jumped back and shouted. He told us to run. We didn't ask questions. We turned around and sprinted toward the road again. I looked behind me, expecting to see someone chasing us, but the yard was empty.
I thought both Adam and Zach were right behind me, but when I reached the road and looked back, I only saw Zach. I was near a gig construction dumpster, standing on one side of it and Zach was on the other. I watched him glance to his right toward the space behind the dumpster I couldn't see from where I stood. He froze. Then I heard him say, "We don't want any trouble." His voice was shaking. He looked over at me and told me to run to his truck. I didn't hesitate. I bolted to the truck, which was parked just down the street, and jumped inside. Adam was already in his own car. He had gotten spooked and ran off before either of us. Zach peeled out of the neighborhood. As we drove, he told me what he saw behind the dumpster. A tall figure in dark clothing had slowly stepped out, moving toward him with arms raised. It wasn't a sprint. It was more like a slow, deliberate approach. That's when Zach spoke to them and told me to run. He said the figure then moved around the dumpster like it was coming toward me. He didn't wait to see what would happen next. Adam later called to tell us that as he drove away, he looked in his rearview mirror and saw 3 figures running in the street. He couldn't tell who they were or where they came from. He thought maybe they were locals just trying to scare people away. But the way they acted, the way they moved, it didn't feel like kids messing around. They didn't shout or laugh or say anything. Just pure silence and movement. All 3 of us were in our late teens or 20s, not the kind of people who scare easy. And yet that night left us shaken. Zach later told me he had gone back to that same unfinished house on a different night with another friend. He said something similar happened. Figures watching, strange noises, the feeling of being surrounded. He thought maybe it was some kind of group that met there regularly. A cult maybe, or just a bunch of people who used the half-built house as their own hideout. I have no idea. But I haven't gone back there, and I never planned to. That night taught me that some places, even the ones that seem half-built and empty, aren't really empty at all. Sometimes you're being watched, even if you can't see who's doing it. And sometimes leaving quickly is the only smart thing you can do.